United States President Donald Trump this week added 15 more countries, including Nigeria and the Palestinian Authority, to a list of those to be affected by his latest travel restrictions. The most significantly widened sweeping limits announced earlier this year on who can travel to or emigrate to the United States. The move reinforces the Trump administration's resolve to tighten U.S. entry standards for travel and immigration. Such expansion of restrictions had been expected after the arrest of an Afghan national suspect in connection with the shooting of 2 National Guard troops over Thanksgiving weekend. In June, President Trump announced that citizens of 12 countries will be banned from coming to the United States, with those from 7 other nations marked to face restrictions. At the time, the ban included Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, the Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, with heightened restrictions on visitors from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela. Now, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. SamAmadi, joins us to discuss Trump's administration's decision to include Nigeria among the list of countries for a visa ban. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Amadi, what do you make of this decision by the U.S. government? Is it justified in your opinion?
Well, it's difficult to say a decision to ban, whether partial or total ban, of nationals of a country would be justified, except within the very narrow prison of exclusionary state interest. Now, again, some of the countries listed, especially in the initial ban list, are countries that are a different form of noticeable and unarguable state failure. Some of them very much conflict-ridden, Afghanistan and so on, and noted exporters of, or maybe whose nationals have been involved in overt actions of terrorism, of terrorist nature. Nigeria coming there, in the first Trump administration, Nigeria had a partial ban at some point. So maybe people can argue that with recent events, maybe putting Nigeria in the list of partial ban, which includes places like Sierra Leone and so on, may not be too much stretch for 3 reasons. One, Trump, whether right or wrong, has raised consistently what he perceives as perhaps Nigeria's terror actions against Christians in Nigeria. That's number one. Number two is that there's this allegation around Nigeria refusing to receive refugees or deportees in transit. And thirdly, the fact that Nigeria's social standing, especially with America, with Trump, and even the report of the recent delegation suggests that Nigeria might be on the left side of Trump's favorable consideration. So all put together, it's surprising, annoying, sad, but perhaps not unexpected that Nigeria will, sooner or later feature in one of those lists, the total ban and the partial ban. Thankfully, we are in the partial ban, but it's still bad, but not inexplicable. You can explain it in many ways that Nigeria's reputation is not that good. Nigerians also have overstayed visa in notable cases, and generally, perhaps some would say Trump's MAGA fixation around the fact that most of the crime is alleged that these crimes are committed by nationals who come from what they call malfunctioning countries. Trump has been clear that he would prefer immigration from white, if you like, if you're using the racial consideration, but that advanced and, in his view, richer countries than from most often black equals to poor and malfunctioning countries. So this divide can be racially constructed or socioeconomically constructed as variables around economic growth, around value system, around culture, around social behavior, or variable around race, white race, black race, or non-white race.
You completely hit the nail on the head with that response. On top of that, one of the issues you mentioned was our overstay rate in the United States. It's 11.9% apparently, but we're also one of the top 10 source of international students for United States schools. We do know that the U.S. president had a huge issue with universities earlier on in the year concerning their international student intake. But in general, should we be expecting our Nigerian government to retaliate with any similar restrictions or on American citizens? Or how do you expect that we will respond to this?
If we are still under Abacha, maybe we'll retaliate. I mean, Abacha was notable or notorious for, tit for tat, even if it didn't make sense. So, but here we can't. I don't think anything will happen like that. I mean, Nigerian government is going to rationalize it, try to find a silver lining in this and say, well, we stay back, we build our country, and so on and so forth. But look, it's really bad. We are increasingly weakened and weakened. I mean, Ghana is not there notably, so it's something to bear in mind. Some people cynically say because Ghana received deportees. No, I think Ghana, in spite of its economic weakness, is like a star in a sense that both in its civility, in its conduct, and the image that it communicates to Washington, everybody, is of a generally decent country. Maybe not rich, but again, respectable in the things they do. So that we are there is really a vote of no confidence in the way we do things, our government, our social reputation right now. But again, what can we do? I think that maybe some strategic, smart engagement, not tit for tat, really. That's nothing we're going to scratch America. And if we do something, then they're going to slam dunk. Trump will do something worse. And we've seen what's going on in Venezuela, in the U.S. hemisphere, apart from China, Russia, and notably China, Russia, maybe not Korea, ironically. I don't see anybody that Trump is not willing to hit at. So that's not advisable. Myself, I'm also a beneficiary of the, going to America to study 3 degrees at Harvard, scholarship. But the point is, this helps us a lot. But the point is that maybe we should not be thinking around 3 things. One is, I think the rate of escaping to the U.S. is really becoming troubling and elsewhere in the world. I mean, if I was a president of a country, I also be worried about Nigerians coming the guys to school and then staying back, coming the guys for terrorism. This is a World Cup year. Part of this preemptive action is Trump maybe flagging. I mean, Trump cannot say, fans don't come, no visa. But now that many countries have been put on a partial or full ban, fans are not going to come. So he has achieved the idea of, because many of those people are one or the other going to find themselves staying back in the U.S. That's what experience tells us. So I think the first is to respond domestically in a way that we begin to reduce this tendency to move out of Nigeria, to find excuse to just stay away from the country. And the second thing is now to begin to think about how to harness their cultural, star power. We have significant cultural power in terms of literature, in terms of music, but they're not being strategically harnessed to profile Nigeria in a better light. And the third issue is, look, fix elections. Have credible elections, credible government, like Ghana does. That's really why Ghana is not there. This story around receiving deportees, it's not the point. The point is that Ghana, measure, looks good in Washington. Not powerful, but decent. So we have to now work on that third leg to make sure that we have credible elections, credible government, and then we can now begin to be seen as a country, not just exporting oil and natural resources, but a country that the U.S. could partner and show off as, perhaps if they say we are racist, but we have Nigeria as a friend. If we say we are burdened African countries, they can say the biggest economy, the largest country in terms of population in Africa, Nigeria is under that ban. So they find in us incentive to use us to say we're not that bad. But if we don't do these 3 things, I think we've just no option diplomatically to get Washington to act, nicer to us. That's where we are. We have no leverage right now.
Now, Dr. Amadi, this ban comes just a few weeks after the U.S. president threatened to invade Nigeria, to fight Boko Haram terrorists. So what does this inclusion and, of course, the earlier threats, what exactly does this say about the current state of U.S.-Nigeria diplomatic relations, and how can it be improved?
I think the U.S.-Nigeria diplomatic relationship is not fractious in a noticeable way. It's not, you're not seeing tit for tat or flare-ups or some dramatic action at the level of maybe you recall an ambassador, the kind of things that signal breakdown of relationships. So you are not seeing that. But it's actually more discreetly vicious and dangerous that Washington seems to have a very bad view, condescending view, dismissive view of Nigeria. I mean, you saw the threat, the Nigeria now disgraced country. Trump keeps repeating it, and then we thought we've made a breakthrough when the high-power delegation came in and met with the NSA and met with the governor. The government's spin masters spinned it as the towing of the ice. There's a de-escalation, a reapproachment between Washington and Abuja. But the report that came out of that visit was even more damning and suggests that the whole official speak, the whole statements did not change Washington's real view about Nigeria. So what needs to be done is to take seriously the fact that we have a very terrible foreign policy or foreign diplomacy. I mean, it might not be the fault of the minister or the president alone, but basically somehow public diplomacy is terrible, and we are not communicating to the right people in Washington and not the right language. And again, in a world of Internet of Things, in a world that's connected, deeply connected, you can't run away from the dissonance between official speak or diplomatic language, the diplomatics and diplomatic statements, and the actual happenings in their country. So, like the report of the U.S. delegation says, they're not seeing significant alignment or realignment of Nigerian domestic policy, Nigeria's strategic policy, and the impression Nigeria wants to create in Washington. So the first thing that this shows that is basically disbelief. When that team came and I was asked on a rise here, I said they're going to restate that view because I know how they'll think, having been SA on foreign affairs before, and I know we've not done anything, and we don't have a strong communication that kind of changes their perception. So I wasn't surprised when the report came out and they're still restating Trump's major thesis that Nigeria is guilty of genocide against Northern Christians. Nothing changed, nothing moved apart from all the resources wasted. So I think the problem is that we need to now begin to know that we are feeble. We don't have the hard power to force change of perception or change of action towards Nigeria, but we can have soft power. One of the soft power is that internally our policies are civilized and they sound nice to people in Washington and elsewhere, and the citizens themselves re-echo them, and the influencers and thought leaders in the country and outside the country kind of legitimize those policies, and that's what Washington will now begin to take seriously. So if we don't have hard power, they will have to have soft power, and for now we don't have either.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation to be in, but does this signal a broader disengagement strategy with the African continent under the current administration, in your view?
I think yes, there is some basic disinterest. I mean, if you look at Washington before now, in the last, let's say 10 years, they have been more condescending, more kind of, it's like patronizing. So democracy, the left need to look good. Their virtue signaling need to make sense. So they have to embrace Africa. They have to talk about how important Africa is. But in real sense, perhaps they know Africa is not that important. So I think there's a diplomatic disconnect. But at the primary level of raw material, earth resources, there will be reconnection, especially to contend against China, and that's what we're going to see. But Washington will now select maybe places like Sudan, maybe a place like Gabon, places like Nigeria. They're going to reconnect, but in a strategic, transactional manner, to either ward off or limit China or themselves, come and grab raw material. But beyond this, I think the state where we are today, the African continent, is unfortunately, in terms of both hard economic power, in terms of economic growth, in terms of liberal ideas in terms of intellectual, unlike in the past, we had a lot of cultural power with our universities, with our intellectuals and thinkers who are in the continent. Most of those who have survived are outside the continent. So I think that the continent is more like now like a barren land. It's more like a drought-infested, a place that's after famine. So really nothing that kind of entices Washington in Africa. But in the era of human rights and not the posturing seem to be sweeping fast. So what is left now is raw state interests. And so if Africa has no economic power, if Africa has not seen a renaissance, a revival, Africa rising, maybe in terms of technological advancement, innovation, not only in dancing and music, then Washington and other major powers will probably be more concerned with seeing Africa as another theater of major power struggle now between China and the US and a place for raw material, a second neocolonialism in a different guise. So that's really the tragic state where we find ourselves right away.
Well, Director, Abuja School of Social and Political Thought, Dr. SamAmadi, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.